It's funny how the human heart works. You can swear to God you've built walls around it, and then one stubborn smile sneaks in through the cracks like a damn sunbeam. That's exactly what happened the night Dr. Adrian Hale transferred to St. Luke's Medical Center. The hospital was my sanctuary and my prison. After 6 years of residency, I'd perfected the art of existing without truly feeling coffee, charting, surgery, repeat. The night shift was my escape from the world's noise, from family expectations, from the endless stream of, "When are you going to settle down?" questions that I'd mastered dodging with humor. Then Adrian walked in, late on a Friday night, smelling faintly of rain and antiseptic, his ID badge still crooked on his scrub top. He looked like chaos dressed in compassion, the kind of person who laughs with his whole body, the kind who doesn't just save lives, but somehow makes people believe they deserve saving. "Hey," he'd said, flashing me that irreverent grin. "You must be Dr. Parker. I heard you're the best surgeon here." I glanced up from my notes. "You heard wrong. I'm just the one who stays the latest." He laughed deep, genuine, the kind that filled the sterile hallways with warmth, and I hated how my chest tightened just hearing it. For weeks, we worked side by side, adrenaline, exhaustion, the constant beeping of monitors. We shared midnight coffee, quiet jokes, the strange intimacy of two people surviving chaos together. And no matter how many times I told myself not to, I started watching him when he wasn't looking. There's something magnetic about watching someone care, really care, in a world that's grown numb. Adrian had that reckless tenderness that scared me because I'd buried mine years ago. He noticed everything, the way my hands trembled slightly when a patient coded, the way I'd go quiet after delivering bad news. And instead of ignoring it, he stayed. He didn't try to fix me. He just stayed. One night, we sat in the on-call room, both too tired to speak. Rain tapped against the window, thunder rolling somewhere far away. Adrian was lying on the couch, one arm draped over his eyes, voice low. "Do you ever feel like this place eats parts of you?" I blinked, staring at the ceiling. "All the time." He chuckled softly. "Then why do you keep letting it?" "Because it's all I have." Silence. Then, quietly, "Maybe it doesn't have to be." That night, something in me shifted. The hospital wasn't the same after that. Every stolen glance, every brush of hands passing instruments, it all felt heavier, charged. I told myself it was nothing, but the way he looked at me told a different story. Then came the accident. A car crash, multiple casualties. The ER was chaos, blood, screaming, alarms. Adrian and I worked side by side for hours, hands shaking but steady, adrenaline surging. I could feel him next to me, the heat of him, the focus, the silent understanding that kept us both going. But when one of the patients flatlined, a teenage girl, maybe 16, Adrian froze. I saw it happen. His pupils dilated, his breathing ragged. "Adrian," I barked. "Focus." He didn't move, just stared. Later, after we pronounced her, he disappeared. I found him outside, sitting on the curb in the rain, hands covered in dried blood, shaking. "She looked like my sister," he whispered. "Same eyes." I wanted to say something, anything, but all that came out was silence. So I sat next to him, in the rain, until the shaking stopped. That night, when he leaned in, just a breath away from me, I didn't move. I didn't stop him. His lips were trembling, cold from the storm, but the kiss was warm, desperate, and soft, and terrifyingly real. It was everything I'd sworn I'd never want again. I broke it first. "This can't happen," I said. "We work together." He smiled sadly. "Then tell me to stop wanting you." Couldn't. From then on, every night was a battle. Every look across the OR, every casual brush of shoulders in the hallway, every late shift where exhaustion made honesty slip out too easily. He made me laugh again. He made me feel again. And I hated him for it. But rumors travel fast in a hospital. And one morning, I walked into the staff lounge to find whispers already blooming like infection. Someone had seen us. Someone had talked. It shouldn't have mattered, two consenting adults. But St. Luke's had a strict no fraternization policy. Worse, I was his superior. If this got out, his career would be the first casualty. So I did the only thing I knew how to do. Pushed him away. I told you this was a mistake, I said in the locker room, my tone cold enough to cut glass. He stood there, stunned. You don't mean that. I do. Then look me in the eye and tell me you feel nothing. I looked. I lied. I feel nothing. He didn't chase me that time. He just nodded, quietly, like he'd already expected it. Then he walked away. The nights after that were unbearable. The silence between us, the way he'd avoid my gaze, the way I caught myself memorizing the sound of his footsteps anyway. But fate, cruel, poetic fate, wasn't done yet. A month later, a power outage hit during a storm. The hospital plunged into darkness. The generator failed. ICU patients were critical. Chaos, panic, and in the middle of it all, Adrian's voice cutting through the noise, calm, steady, leading. He'd always been light in dark places. When the lights finally came back, I found him slumped against the wall outside the ICU, blood seeping through his scrub sleeve. Adrian, it's nothing, he said, forcing a smile. Just a stupid fall. But it wasn't nothing. He'd taken a hit protecting a patient when a ceiling tile collapsed. I patched him up myself, hands shaking the whole time. And as I cleaned the wound, he caught my wrist. Still feel nothing? He whispered. My throat closed. Adrian, please. Because I still feel everything. The dam broke. Months of fear, denial, longing, it all came rushing out. I can't lose you, I said, voice raw. Not like this. Not because I was too scared to want you. He smiled through the pain. Then don't. And that's how love began again, not with a grand confession, but in a hospital room at 3 a.m., surrounded by flickering lights and the hum of machines. For a week after the storm, Adrian was on medical leave. The hospital corridors felt unnervingly quiet without his laughter echoing somewhere in the distance. Every shift felt longer, the coffee colder, the air heavier. I'd tell myself I was fine, that I'd made the right choice, and then I'd catch myself typing a text to him at 3 a.m. before deleting it. When he finally came back, I didn't recognize him at first. Same scrubs, same crooked badge, same restless energy, but something in his eyes had changed. There was a distance there now, a polite calm that felt like punishment. Welcome back, I said, forcing a smile in the break room. Thanks, he replied. His tone was professional, distant, like I was just another colleague, and maybe that's what I deserved. But professionalism only lasts until 2 a.m. when you're elbow deep in an emergency. That night, we were called into surgery for a patient with massive internal bleeding after a bar fight. It was messy, brutal, and long, the kind of case that tests every ounce of control you've got. Clamp, I ordered. Here. His gloved hand brushed mine, the briefest contact, electric and cruel. We didn't speak again until hours later, after the patient stabilized. Exhausted, drenched in sweat, I leaned against the scrub sink, staring at my reflection. My face looked older, harder. Good work, Adrian said quietly behind me. I turned. You too. He hesitated, then asked, Do you ever think about that night? My hands froze mid-motion. The air between us tightened. Every damn day, I admitted. He took a step closer. Then why are we pretending it didn't happen? Because pretending keeps you safe, I said bitterly. And it keeps me from losing my license. Safe? He echoed. You think hiding how you feel is safety? You're bleeding out and you don't even know it. That hit harder than it should have. He left before I could respond. For days, his words haunted me, not because they were cruel, but because they were true. I'd spent my entire life hiding. Behind work, behind sarcasm, behind the mask of a doctor who fixed everyone except himself. Then something unexpected happened. A patient, an older man named Harold, came in with a heart condition. He'd been admitted multiple times, always refusing treatment. But this time, he didn't want to be saved. I've lived enough, he said, voice soft. But my husband, he's not ready to let go. The words hit me like a defibrillator. Husband. The way he said it, simple, unapologetic, filled with decades of love, it was everything I'd been afraid to be. Later that night, I saw Adrian sitting by Harold's bedside, holding his husband's hand as the old man slept. He looked up when he saw me, eyes soft but steady. "You ever notice," he whispered, "how love doesn't ask permission to exist? It just does." Something in me cracked open. After Harold passed quietly 2 nights later, his husband kissed his forehead and said, "See you soon, my love." No tears, no shame, just peace. Watching them, I realized that what Adrian and I had messy, complicated, terrifying was still real. That night, I drove to his apartment. It was raining again because of course it was. The city lights blurred through the downpour as I stood outside his door, soaked and shaking like some bad rom-com cliché. He opened the door in a hoodie and sweatpants, hair messy, eyes wide. "Eli?" I hadn't realized until then how much I'd missed hearing my name from him. "I can't do this anymore," I said, breathless. "I can't keep pretending you don't matter. You do. You always have." He didn't say anything, just stared at me like he was afraid to believe it. "I don't care about the rules," I continued. "I don't care if people talk. He pulled me inside mid-sentence, his hands on my face, and then he kissed me. Hard. Like months of silence had been waiting for this moment to break. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate, messy, all-consuming, but it was real. And for the first time in years, I let myself feel everything. When we finally pulled apart, he rested his forehead against mine, breathing hard. "You know this won't be easy," he murmured. I nodded. "Since when has anything worth it ever been?" That night wasn't perfect. It wasn't the start of some fairy tale. But it was honest, and that honesty felt like freedom. The weeks that followed were a strange mix of euphoria and fear. We were careful, discreet glances in the hall, brief touches behind closed doors, moments that lived in the quiet spaces between chaos. But secrets don't stay secret forever. It was a Tuesday morning when Dr. Grant, our department head, called me into his office. His tone was clipped, his eyes cold. "I received a report about inappropriate conduct between you and Dr. Hale." My stomach dropped. "I assume you understand the seriousness of this?" I nodded, forcing calm. "If this is about professionalism, I assure you," he cut me off. "You're his superior, Dr. Parker. This could be considered coercion, a violation of hospital policy." Felt like the floor vanished beneath me. "I'll handle it," I said quietly. "See that you do," he replied. I left his office numb. The gossip had finally reached the top. That night, I found Adrian in the supply room, restocking gloves. His back was turned, but somehow he already knew. "They talked to you, didn't they?" "Yeah," he exhaled, leaning against the counter. "So this is it?" I shook my head. "No, not this time." For once, I wasn't going to run. I went straight to HR the next morning and filed a transfer request out of the surgical department. It was career suicide, but I didn't care. Adrian found me after my shift, sitting in the courtyard with 2 coffees. "You did it," he said softly. "I did." "Why?" "Because I want to love you without looking over my shoulder." He smiled, that same unguarded, reckless smile that ruined me the first night we met. "You're insane," he said. "Probably. I love it." He sat beside me, our shoulders brushing. The city buzzed around us, but for once, the noise didn't matter. Months passed. I adjusted to my new role in research, quieter, slower, less adrenaline, but strangely peaceful. Adrian remained in the ER, still saving the world one chaotic night at a time. We didn't hide anymore, though we didn't flaunt it either. We existed somewhere in the middle, like any other couple trying to make it work. Sometimes I'd stop by after his shift with coffee. Sometimes he'd show up at my apartment at dawn, smelling like antiseptic and exhaustion, collapsing into bed beside me. One morning, I woke to find him tracing the lines on my hand. "What are you doing?" I mumbled. "Learning the map of someone I don't ever want to lose." I laughed softly. "That's corny as hell." "Yeah, but it's true. And maybe that's what love really is, not grand gestures or cinematic moments, but quiet mornings and shared exhaustion and the simple act of choosing each other, again and again." But life, as always, had one more test waiting. One evening, A mass casualty incident hit the city, a building collapsed downtown. St. Luke's was chaos again. I was off duty, but when the call came, I went in anyway. The ER was flooded with patients. I scanned the room, searching for Adrian, and when I finally saw him, he was crouched beside a young boy, performing CPR. Blood on his scrubs, determination etched into his face. He didn't see the debris falling until it was too late. The world seemed to slow as a section of the ceiling gave way. I shouted his name, sprinting forward too late. He hit the ground hard, dust and chaos filling the air. For a split second, I couldn't breathe. Then instinct took over. We got him out, rushed him to the OR. He was bleeding from a deep gash near his ribs, pulse weak but steady. I scrubbed in myself. I wasn't about to let someone else touch him. The surgery was long, brutal, every second a war between terror and control. My hands didn't shake, not once, but my heart was breaking the whole time. When it was finally over, I sat by his bed, holding his hand, listening to the steady beep of the monitor. He looked impossibly pale but alive. When he finally opened his eyes hours later, I couldn't stop the tears. "Hey," he whispered weakly. "You look terrible." I laughed, choking on relief. "You almost died, you idiot." "Almost," he murmured. "But I couldn't. Not when I promised you forever." Recovery was slow. He hated being still, hated being the patient. But I was relentless, strict, overprotective, maybe even annoying. He pretended to hate it, but I caught the small smiles when he thought I wasn't looking. One night, while I was checking his vitals, he caught my wrist and said, "Eli, yeah. When all this started, you said you didn't want to love anyone at work." I smiled. "Guess you proved me wrong." He grinned weakly. "Guess I did." He leaned up, pressing his lips to mine, soft, slow, steady. "Don't ever stop choosing me," he whispered. "Never." A year later, we left St. Luke's. Together. He took a position at a community clinic in Seattle. I joined a research foundation. We moved into a small apartment with a view of the bay. It wasn't fancy, leaky faucet, squeaky floors, but it was ours. Some nights, we'd sit on the balcony, watching the sunset paint the water gold. He'd rest his head on my shoulder, and I'd think about all the chaos we survived to get here. Love hadn't fixed everything. It hadn't erased the scars, the loss, the fear, but it made all of it worth surviving. Because at the end of it all, love wasn't about rules or reputation. It was about the courage to be seen fully, fearlessly, and without apology. And every time Adrian looked at me with that same quiet certainty, I knew I'd never regret breaking every rule for him. The first winter in Seattle was harsh, gray, and endless. Rain tapped at the windows constantly, the sky an unbroken sheet of slate. Yet, for the first time in years, it didn't feel oppressive. Felt like home. Adrian and I had settled into a rhythm. Mornings were coffee and quiet chatter on the balcony. Evenings were long walks along the bay, hand in hand, wrapped in scarves and each other's warmth. We still had our scars, both visible and invisible, but for once, it didn't feel like we were defined by them. We were defined by us. One evening, after a particularly brutal week at the clinic, Adrian came home with a battered takeout bag and a mischievous grin. "I figured you could use some comfort food," he said, tossing me a container of fried chicken. I laughed, my chest warming in a way it hadn't since the day we first kissed in the rain. "Comfort food? Are you trying to bribe me for something?" "Maybe," he said, smirking. "Maybe I just like watching you eat like a hungry bear after a long shift." I rolled my eyes but let him sit beside me on the worn couch, our legs brushing, fingers intertwining. The city hummed outside our window, neon reflections dancing on puddles from the day's rain. The streets were crowded, full of tourists, fishmongers, and buskers. Adrian insisted on carrying my backpack because, "You're too serious a researcher to be lugging that around." I protested but smiled anyway. We wandered through stalls, tasting pastries and picking up little trinkets. At one point, Adrian grabbed my hand as we crossed the street, pressing a kiss into the back of it. "Still can't believe you almost told me to go away," he teased. I sighed dramatically, smiling. I was young, naive, and terrified. Also slightly stupid. Yeah, he said, grinning, but stubborn enough to stay anyway. That evening, we cooked together for the first time. The apartment smelled of garlic and herbs, our laughter mingling with the sizzle of the pan. Adrian flopped dramatically onto the counter when I accused him of dropping too much salt, and I ended up chasing him around the kitchen, flour dusting our hair and clothes. It was messy. It was chaotic. And it was perfect. The following month, a new challenge arose, a family gathering I couldn't avoid. My parents had flown to Seattle, expecting the perfect son, who had nothing but his career to brag about. They didn't know about Adrian yet. I was nervous, trembling, but I refused to leave him behind. Are you sure? Adrian asked, brushing a strand of hair from my face. I'm sure. We've come too far to hide now. The evening was a delicate dance of introductions and small talk. My parents were polite but probing, Adrian quiet but attentive, his hand never leaving mine. By the end of the night, after laughter and awkward toasts, my mother smiled at me. He's a good man, Eli, she said softly. I exhaled, relief flooding me. Adrian squeezed my hand under the table, his eyes twinkling with pride and affection. Summer arrived, and with it, the sense of possibility. We took trips along the coast, camping in the Olympic Peninsula, sleeping under stars, the scent of pine and salt air filling our lungs. Nights were spent beside campfires, Adrian telling stories of his ER adventures, me teasing him mercilessly for exaggeration. One night, lying side by side on a blanket, the Milky Way spread overhead, Adrian turned to me. Eli, I don't think I ever properly told you, he said softly. I looked at him, heart thrumming. I love you. Not just the idea of you, not just when it's convenient or easy. I love you, all of you, even the scared, stubborn, workaholic parts. I pressed my forehead against his. I love you too, and I promise, I'm never letting fear make me push you away again. We stayed like that for hours, wrapped in each other, letting the night whisper around us. The world felt endless and beautiful. By fall, we had established ourselves firmly together, committed and unafraid. Work was still demanding, but we had a life outside the hospital. Dinner dates, late-night walks, weekend getaways. Adrian would sometimes fall asleep in my arms on the couch after a long shift, and I'd watch him, heart full, knowing that every risk we took, every fear we conquered, had led to this. We celebrated milestones, our first anniversary, quiet but meaningful. I made reservations at a small rooftop restaurant overlooking the city. He brought a bouquet of wildflowers he'd picked himself. We toasted with cheap wine and laughter, and for the first time the world felt soft around us. And then came the small, ordinary moments that mattered most. Sharing coffee in the rain before work, holding hands through crowded streets, reading in silence, our legs tangled on the couch, cooking messy meals together and laughing until our sides hurt. Love, I realized, wasn't the grand gestures in movies. It was the quiet, unwavering presence of someone who chose you every day, despite chaos, exhaustion, and fear. Adrian was that person for me. I was that person for him. One rainy night, months later, Adrian and I stood on the balcony, looking at the city lights mirrored in puddles below. He reached for my hand, squeezing it gently. You know, he said, voice soft, I used to think love at work was a bad idea. I laughed, leaning against him. And now, he kissed my temple. Now, I can't imagine not feeling this with you. Not here, not anywhere. I smiled, letting the rain fall over us, feeling it wash away every trace of doubt or fear. Neither can I. We kissed again, softly, gently, letting the world exist without us for just a moment. The city buzzed below, the rain sang on the roof, and for the first time, I felt completely, undeniably, safe. And that's how we lived, choosing each other, over and over, in a world that demanded caution and conformity. We didn't need approval. We didn't need perfection. We needed love, and we had it, messy and imperfect and beautiful. In the end, the hospital had given us chaos, heartbreak, fear, and exhaustion. But it had also given us each other, and sometimes that was enough to rewrite every rule we'd ever believed in. Because love, real love, wasn't about timing or safety. It was about courage. It was about hope. And it was about two hearts daring to beat together, even in the middle of the storm. We stayed together, hand in hand, hearts intertwined, facing life, its pain, its joy, and all its unpredictable turns as one. And in that, we found something rare, something true, something that no rule, no policy, no fear could ever take away. The rain fell outside, but inside our small apartment, warmth reigned. And for the first time, I could finally say without doubt, I am home. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.